Welcome back, everybody, to Stop Interviewing, Start Selling. I'm your host, Philip Meyer, and today, everyone, we have an extremely special guest, the one and only Will McDonald. Will, thank you so much for doing my podcast. I'm deeply honored by you being on my show. How are you?
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure. Doing well, and I've got to tell you, Philip, you're just as handsome on Zoom and LinkedIn as you are in person. And man, what I would give for your hair. I mean, wow.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, my wife and I, so I always have to credit her when somebody mentions my hair because, not that people mention my hair all the time. Let me just clarify that. I'm not trying to be arrogant or say I know I'm handsome, but no, she actually cuts my hair on a semi weekly basis, so she does a fantastic job. And last time you saw me, my hair was probably all spiked up. So
Yes, I remember the spikes.
yeah, so she told me I couldn't do that anymore because I'm not 12, and I was like, all right, makes sense.
But you
So
might be 12 at heart. You could be 12 at heart.
yeah, yeah, I think if I'm around my kids and we're playing, I think I'm really like a 5-year old because I'll stoop down to their level and chase them around the house and get out of breath. It's a great reminder that I'm completely out of shape. So Will, we're talking today about the evolution of sales trainings, sales tactics, and I've got a couple questions for you, and I'm sure that you have some amazing answers. But before we get into that, let me just introduce everybody to Will. So if you're watching my show, you're not a part of the Universe family, as I call it. Will was actually one of the first sales trainers that I ever really came in contact with, either with Universe or in sales in general. So when I'm talking to Will, if you hear me stuttering, or you see my hands kind of shaking a little bit, it's because to me, Will McDonald is the face of sales training, uh, just across the industry. That's my personal opinion. So, but for those of you who don't know you, Will, tell us about your background a little bit. How did you get started in sales?
Well, it was pretty simple. I was born into it. My dad, for 35 years or so, was a door-to-door salesperson back when there was somebody home during the day. He sold chimney cleans and furnace overhauls. Before I was born, he ran a crew of salespeople in the greater Boston area, but after I was born, he migrated to New Hampshire and worked for a different company. And I remember as a 3 or 4 year old walking into my parents' bedroom, and on their wardrobe they had a wardrobe piece of furniture, and on top of the wardrobe were these ginormous trophies. And I don't mean they were big because I was 3 or 4 years old. They were like 3 and 4 footers, and this was from the 50s. And he and his crews awarded for selling millions of dollars of business in the 50s, door to door. And then when I was around 6, 7, 8, he started taking me cold calling. He'd park the car at one end of a street, and I was a lot better looking in those days when I was 6 or 7. I had all my hair, I had freckles, and we would walk up one side of the street, and he would use me to get in. And he was very smart. He was not an educated man, but he had such an intellect. So he wore gray on gray uniform, work spit shined, and I shined them for 50 cents a pair for many years. Spit shined work shoes with a very unusual tread that I can't even soul tread. And he had a telescoping mirror that he would look up into the chimney. And he had one of those aluminum order form, like portable desks, they used to call them. And I couldn't articulate it, but the man had such a power. I believe that selling is a superpower. And man, I'm just a little kid, but I'm seeing him tell some people their furnace was fine, and then other people, because he was a very honest man, and some people that they, really needed a furnace cleaning. He worked straight commission, no insurance. And I remember that he would collect a $25 deposit, which is what we would call spiking the deal, and then schedule the vacuum truck to come by and do the chimney. So I was born into it. And in fact, in later years, when I was in business for myself, he actually worked for me for a number of years and got into the commercial industrial because, as you know, at some point, nobody was home anymore, just the dog.
Right. That's it. There's a lot to unpack there. And I think every time that you and I have had a conversation, whether it's in a sales training class or whether it's through this kind of a format, spiking the deal, I'm always gonna keep that in my brain because I feel like that's, and we're gonna come back to that topic as well, as far as sales tactics that still work nowadays as far versus sales tactics that might be outdated. But so then would you say that it's fair to say that your dad kind of inspired you to get into sales?
Oh, so much so. You know, again, I don't believe he went past the seventh grade, but he had a tremendous intellect, read like crazy. Along with my mom, was a Scrabble ninja. I used to hate playing them Scrabble because they would just leave me decimated.
Mhm.
And he always had positive things to say. He knew way back before all of the grandfathers and patriarchs of motivation and self-development that you had to have the right mental attitude. In fact, before PMA, positive mental attitude, came out, for him, it was RMA, right mental attitude. And he
Mm.
had a little chalkboard in the kitchen and he would write things like every day. And I remember just one of the things that most moved me from this very humble, uneducated man who was my beloved dad was live and let live. I mean, what else do you need? Live and let live. And in this tumultuous, crazy world that we live in, that's not a very common theme. But that was my dad. Just for me, amazing. I think a lot of guys maybe have some issues with their dads, or their dads have expectations that aren't met by their sons. But man, when he went to his grave, God rest his soul, there was nothing left on the table. There were no debts. There were no issues. Um, he was just great. And yes, so yes, he knew that in order to sell, you had to have a game face, and to a great degree, the game face has to be authentic. I mean, you can't fake a game face day in and day out for years. You can do it once in a while when you're feeling ill, or you had a fight with your wife or husband, but no, he was very authentic.
Yeah, that's leaving nothing behind, like no debts or any of that. That's something that I've given a lot more thought to, especially having children, right? And maybe it's a morbid thought. My wife tells me I'm paranoid, but I was thinking about how often I'm driving. And I'm like, man, if I don't have enough life insurance or enough assets to leave behind, my family's going to be in debt, right? So it's a lot of preparation in that sense. But it seems like that is something that most people don't think of. So what was your first sales job?
Yeah, just to clear it up, I didn't just mean financial debt. I meant
Right.
emotional debt. There was no emotional debt between us. And you're right. With my children, every time I email them, text them, have a conversation live or over the phone, when we're done, I always say I love you, because I don't know if I'm ever going to see them again. And even I kissed them on the cheek before the COVID thing happened. I'm sorry, I digressed. Your question again was, sir?
What was your first sales job?
Um, Almost embarrassing. My first official sales job was working for a company long gone, I'm sure, called the Family Record Plan. And it was about in-studio photography. They had a contract with Olin Mills. I don't know if Olin Mills was national or just regional. And you would hook up with a new mom, and you would sign them up for a 5 or 10 year photographic record plan, where every X amount of months they would go in, they get their picture taken, and they'd get so many 8x10s or 5x7s. And it was a tough gig because a lot of these moms were like so overwhelmed with the new task of being a mom. And then I went on my own, and this didn't last very long, but I was pretty successful. I would call out of the phone book and book appointments with people that had no fire extinguishers in the house. And I would go with my little drill, and I would install under the sink or in a closet fire extinguishers. So those were my two first ventures into sales. They were not very long, and they were not extremely noteworthy either.
Right. But you probably took a lot from those jobs that kind of translated over to your next chosen path, I would imagine.
Yeah, yes. Knock on the door. You could be feeling like you're going to pee your pants or you're shaking like a leaf. As you're shaking, that's a good way to knock, right? Let the shaking knock the door.
Hmm.
Yeah, you got to knock on the door no matter how tough it is, how unpleasant it is, how badly you were treated at the last door knock. Knock on the door. And that
Yeah,
includes the telephone. I consider the telephone just another way to knock on the door.
absolutely. That's that's been my number one thing too. And you always hear the age-old argument. I see it posted on LinkedIn a lot too, where salespeople they go, well, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality, right? As far as prospecting, hitting doors. And yeah, there's some truth to it, but from my perspective, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a seer stone. I don't pay a psychic money every week to tell me where to go. So in order to figure out where those quality doors are, I have to go hit them first. I have to go knock on the door and actually walk in and get out of my car, right? Because that's been a downfall of many a rep out there that I've seen come and go is that they cherry pick which buildings to go after. Or in sales training, we talk about elephant hunting, right? Like stop targeting just big businesses, like walk into the small ones too, because you got to have your sales average and you want to make your commission. So if you don't do that, you're going to starve basically. So,
Yeah, back before I was with UniFirst,
mhm.
with my previous business partner when I was in an electronic security business for about 10 years, we just called them cheeseburgers and steaks. You know, you need the steaks, you know, to really pay the mortgage, but the cheeseburgers are nice and they're so often quick and simple. So, yeah, and you're right. It's not just be shaking as you knock on the door, it's get the heck out of the car,
Yeah.
put it in park, and open the door. And also, you're right. Some of the best sales I've ever made were at decrepit, beat down buildings where you would think there's not even a business here. Walk in and make a multi-$1,000 sale with somebody who's got more money than God. I mean, you just can't distinguish or discriminate in any way when you're on the street.
Yeah. One of one of my first ever accounts that I signed up. This is back when I was working in the Sacramento office. I was working in downtown Sac, and I was told at the time by my sales manager, the dirtier the job is, the better because they're going to use our services, you know, laundry service or what have you. But I misinterpreted that as the dirtier the building, the better it is. So so I go walk around this big corner. There's this big warehouse or smoke come out of the chimney, and parked right in front is a bright green Lamborghini Murcielago, which is like
Ooh.
a 300 and some odd $1,000 car. So I was like, okay, that must be a meth lab. But hey, maybe they need lab coats. So I go walking in, and it turns out it was a like a painting and recycling company that had about 30 or 40 people that needed clothing. And I happened to just walk into it, right? But had I not turned around the corner and saw that big building, I would have been like, yeah, I'm probably never going to even experience that deal. Um, so what did sales training look like when you were going through the fire extinguisher company? What was one before the chimney? No, that was your dad. What was one you had before?
My first was the family record plan for photography,
That's
and
right.
then selling door to door fire extinguishers, but calling through the phone book, literally the phone book.
Gotcha. So when you came on to those companies, what was sales training like?
Well, interesting and good thing is that sales training has been around for well over 100 years. So I guess my first taste of real official sales training was the Dale Carnegie Company, which is still today a widely respected organization. So I went through a 12-week sales course with Dale Carnegie in 1981, Philip. You weren't even born yet.
I wasn't.
And they called it, in those days, it would probably be looked down upon today. They called their pitch the hook. And the hook was simply, and I'll remember it till the day I die, if there were a way to X, save money, increase productivity, whatever, if there were a way to X, would you be interested? That's the hook. And that was Dale Carnegie in 1981.
Wow. So then that company just, I mean, was that a service that they had paid for as like an outside kind of sales training to come in and help their people sell?
Well, at the time, I was actually selling cars at a Ford
Oh,
dealership, and I didn't care for it too much, and they weren't awfully ethical. This was a long time ago. I think the auto industry or the auto sales industry has redeemed itself a lot,
mhm.
but it was a tough gig, and the owner of the dealership ended up actually going to prison for fraud. But they liked me, and they bought this course. It was 1981. It was like 2 grand or 2,500 bucks. So it was actually the automobile dealership that put me through that Dale Carnegie course. I only worked for them for 6 or 7 months. I was sales rep of the month, I think twice out of the 6 months, but I was just really uncomfortable with some of the things they expected. And though I did not do them, I never bent my values at all.
That's very admirable because that's tough because you go into a company and it's mostly commission based and you get hungry, you get desperate, you start to kind of bend values a little bit. Not that I know from experience at all, but I mean, I can understand how people could get into sales. In fact, Kayla, the last podcast I did, who also has a YouTube channel. So look up Kayla the Car Girl and you'll find her.
Oh, cool.
But she was talking about, or we rather were conversing about the negative connotation of salespeople.
Yes.
And I brought this story to her. Perhaps I tell it here too, but my father-in-law and I were sitting down. I just took this weird personality test. I don't remember if it's for a job or for something else. It's probably just some crazy thing I found online. I was like, oh, okay, I'll try it. And it came back at the results, and the results said, you are a campaigner. And I was like, what does that mean? And my father-in-law at the time said, that's a nice way of saying you're a salesperson. And I was
Yes,
like,
sir.
what do you mean a nice way? Like, I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud to have a business card that says senior sales consultant on it. As long as it's in sales, like I've always wanted to do sales. That's been my thing. So, but from your standpoint, is that why? Because of the previous car business and like the bending morals and ethics? Is that why people have a negative connotation to sales?
Well, there are always people looking to take a shortcut, who are okay with taking advantage of people, who are just in it for gain, no matter who gets hurt. So, sales, like almost any other walk in life, has two camps. One camp is full of people who tell the truth, who are very clear on what their values are, and the other camp casts a shadow on the whole thing. And so, and it will always be that way. So there are salespeople that are unscrupulous, I'm sorry, and that will continue to cast out. But I think in business to business sales, I think it's very clear to most business owners and decision makers that there are plenty of very high quality, upstanding, morally based salespeople. So
Yeah.
in consumer sales, I think consumers can be very wary and concerned about, are they about to get ripped off. I'm not so sure that it's that way so much in business to business sales. I think it all comes across a little more legit in B2B.
Yeah. I think you're right about that too, because I think that the corporations, I'm thinking back to my interview with Universe the first time I came on board, and it was very strenuous. And in fact, I almost didn't even get the job because my RSM, he didn't think I was as excited or as driven. And it was only because when he told me what to expect, like he asked me the question, he goes, so in order to make your nut every month to survive, to pay your bills, and then also to maybe have some toys on the side, what do you need to make? And I give him some super low number because I wanted to appear humble. And I told him, as far as toys, I have no idea what those are. I haven't had toys since I was like 12. So I tried to be super, super humble with them. And then I'm leaving, I went back home, and my sales manager called me, and he's like, hey, you need to come back in like right now and go tell the RSM that you really want this job. You're really excited, because he doesn't think that you're excited at all. I was like, oh no. So I came back in. I've been forever grateful that he gave me that chance to come in. But to your point, I do think that businesses that deal with the B2B sales reps, that deal with these corporations that have these outstanding sales training programs and very extensive interview processes and like certification process, they tend to have a little bit more trust and a little bit more leniency in dealing with salespeople that come in. So, but jumping back to your past real fast. So when you were engaged in your first couple sales jobs, I'm sure the technology back then wasn't nearly as advanced as it is now. And we all know that technology makes things a lot easier. So you probably had a much harder time, regardless of what your skill was, as far as processing accounts or processing sales or paperwork or all that stuff. So what was it that kept you in sales?
Well, I've done some other things alongside of my sales career at more than one organization, plus an organization I was co-owner of. I just can't imagine myself in any other position. To be associated with sales is all I know, really.
Mhm.
But I got to tell you that in 1987, when my business partner and I opened our company,
Mhm.
and we were profitable from year one, which just goes against the statistics, we went up against like 4 to 6 national accounts or national companies, big ones. And we used to do our proposals on a Smith Corona typewriter with an injectable cartridge, right? Black ink, red ink, green ink, and erase. And what we did with our meager technology and our meager budget was we created proposal packages complete with sales literature from companies like Sony and Panasonic and just all kinds of other companies, Westinghouse, that created everything from motion detectors to cameras to access control devices. But we would type up the proposal on a Smith Corona typewriter. In the beginning, he and I were in his mother's basement in 2 steel case desks facing one another with fiberglass insulation everywhere. And we would beat the national companies. We beat the living daylights out of them. Typically, I'm proud to say, with higher prices, sometimes as much as 25% higher. In fact, we got so many bank accounts in the state of New Hampshire, 2 of our national competitors left the state. They closed their offices
Wow.
and left the state. So I'm really huge on what do you look like, and what does your proposal look like, and how professional and prepared is your presentation? Because I think a lot of the deals that we sold had no idea how small we were. They certainly didn't know we were down in his mother's basement cooking up these proposals.
Wow. That's so it sounds like there's a lot more innovation on your end. And that must have been even
Yes.
harder too, because like, I mean, you didn't come into that company with a publicly traded record and a sales training platform already put together. You took what you had learned and what he had learned, and you put together the sales training program for yourself, and also the backbone, the infrastructure, and you also had to worry about the profits and everything else. I mean, that's my hat's off to you, because that's incredible, truly. Um, So then from there, you came on to UniFirst after that?
Many, many years after that. And you inspired me just to share one thing, because I really think it plays into our business when it comes to seeding value,
Hmm.
find a way to bring value. We landed some giant customers, including every bank. Yeah, at one point we had every single bank in the entire state of New Hampshire, every single bank. But companies like GE, Sylvania, and I can go on and on. What we would do, because we had downtime, right? I mean, we did phone blocks, and we would walk into a large company, usually via the phone first, and say, you know what, I know we've been in business less than 3 years, which scared the daylights out of large companies. But let us bring our extension ladder, outside cameras all over the place, back in the days when they needed to be manually adjusted. We'll adjust every single camera you have in your building and outside your building for free, just to show you how freaking good we are. And that worked over and over and over again.
Yeah.
We won customers because I'll do the first service call for free. Watch how good we are. I'm sorry, I jumped on your question.
No, that's fine.
Oh, UniFirst, the Gap. So I did the electronic security till about 2001. Sold my half of the company to my business partner, and then I went on an adventure of motivational speaking, other training venues, and actually professional acting. I did plays and regional films and TV and television ads from Boston to Portland, Maine. I might have done better if I moved to New York or LA, but it was a great time. I learned a ton. And then it was time to reinvent myself for the fifth time. And I knocked on UniFirst door. And like the RSM in your case, my RSM flat out said, no, we're not hiring you. No.
Wow. That's hard to believe for me because I mean, motivational speaking, acting, which teaches you to present yourself in such an amazing light or negative light, depends on the character, right? But I mean, did he say why? You say why he said no?
Oh, yeah. It was because of at that point, I had been self-employed for 15 years,
Hmm.
and he could not, and he was right. Statistically, I was a bad risk, honestly, a bad risk, because I'd been self-employed for 15 years. It could be argued I was overqualified for a street rep position. And so the general manager, great guy, and the sales manager wanted me, but the RSM said no. And so he's a dear friend of mine now. I called him up and I said, I need to book an appointment with you. He said, why? I said, well, I heard that you vetoed me being hired by UniFirst. He said, yeah, I'm sorry to say that's true. I said, well, that's why I need the appointment. He said, well, why? So I can sell you. And so he laughed, gave me the appointment, and I was able, thankfully, to sell him. UniFirst was on my very short list of 3 companies, and I had actually done work for UniFirst. And in fact, as an actor, I was hired years before that to narrate some of the Founders Day video. Philip, if you listen to the Founders Day video, you will hear my voice, but from years before I was hired here at UniFirst. But
Oh,
UniFirst
wow.
was on my short list, and I had a great deal of respect for them, for UniFirst, before I came on board.
Yeah. So by you calling the RSM back, to me, that is ultimately the catalyst of me starting this podcast. And the reason I call it Stop Interviewing, Start Selling, name pending, depending on where this goes. But the whole reason I started is because when COVID hit, the unemployment rate went way, way up. There are people getting laid off. There are people getting fired. There are businesses closing. And I remember back in the recession in 2008, 2009, I had very little sales experience, but I knew one thing, and that was if I take a stack of 100 resumes, the chances of me getting a job after passing all of them out are very, very good. And then my
Yes.
dad was like I credit my dad all the time about this, but he said to me, he said, well, rather than go in and say, hey, you guys hiring? Because everybody says that. Why don't you ask for the hiring manager and go talk to that guy? And I was like, that's a great idea. So, but in your case, I mean, you were told no, you get to the final stages, and even then you didn't give up. You went back and you said, look, let me sit down with you. Let me sell you on who I am so that I can sell your business. That's incredible. That, I mean, guys, if you're listening to this and you're not in sales and you're like, what's the big deal? To have the stones to go back and do that, I mean, the courage, that's amazing. So well done on that, Will.
Philip, I have to ask you a question.
Yeah.
How old were you in 2008? Were you eight? Were you eight?
No, so 2008 to 2009, I was 20, 21 years old. I had just gotten married.
Oh,
And,
you're a little older than you look then.
well, the gray hair is here to prove it. So,
I
and the
have no
beard too,
hair, so
nowadays.
I've got nothing to say on that.
Yeah, I'm 33 years old. But I just got married in 2009. At the time, I was just teaching martial arts. Like that's what I did for a living from the age of 13 years old, like under the table stuff, to 21. And as soon as the school closed, I was like, I don't know what to do because I know how to kick, I know how to punch. But I mean, even in martial arts, we had a phone script to call customers back. We learned kind of without really learning it how to answer objections, how to build value. We learned how to create urgency because we told customers, hey, look, if you get started today and for today only, we'll give you a free uniform, right? So all that kind of translated over to me going out and looking for a job and eventually getting into outside sales with Aflac, and then from Aflac going to UniFirst after that. And I've been to a smattering of other companies, but ended up coming back because of the culture and ultimately the sales training, because that in my opinion is what makes a salesperson able to do excuse me, to do well. So
yeah, and it really sticks. You know,
Mhm.
just a couple of years ago, I was sitting out on a bench outside of the hotel we used back when we were doing face-to-face programs
Mhm.
at corporate headquarters, and it was a beautiful spring day. And this woman comes up to, I didn't even notice her till she was right on me, and she said, in a very French Canadian accent, she said, "Will McDonald?" And I couldn't recognize her. I said, "Yes." And she said, "I was in your BSS class 10 years ago with UniFirst. And I got to tell you, not a day goes by 10 years later, I still don't use the techniques you taught us 10 years ago."
Wow.
The stuff really sticks. And
Yeah.
I'm not taking credit for it. I inherited a very active sales training program when I came on board. But it's pretty cool to meet somebody that you don't remember from 10 years ago
Yeah.
that's still using the techniques.
Yeah. Most definitely. So which brings us to our next topic, because you went from being a sales rep, and I've always wondered this. I've always wanted to ask you this question, but you went from being a sales rep with a Fortune 400 company to then becoming a corporate sales trainer of the same Fortune 400 company, and not dealing with only rookie reps, like brand new green, brand new reps, but you're also dealing with multiple President's Club achieving reps. You're dealing with, I would imagine, national account reps, right? So, I mean, that had to be intimidating, right?
You know, I
No?
think the last time I was intimidated, I was probably 12 years old. I don't get intimidated. I think it's a waste of energy.
Wow.
I just don't see the point in being intimidated. So no, I hope I don't sound braggadocious. I don't get intimidated. I had an experience
Wow.
with a schoolyard bully when I was 12, who I was terrified of,
Mm-hmm.
and end up kind of having an epiphany and scaring the hell out of him. And I don't remember being intimidated ever since.
Wow. That's awesome. So, what was that transition like? I mean, because I mean, I would imagine you probably were a pretty decent sales rep in order to be even considered for sales training.
Yeah, you know, goal setting and visualizing a future are so important. They've put me in so many amazing places. I'm so grateful. So I needed to reinvent my life.
Mhm.
My capital gains from the business I sold my share in was long gone. And so I knew UniFirst and I knew two other companies. And so I was interviewing with all three. And I believe that I was interviewing them as much as they were interviewing me. But my idea was to, for UniFirst, was to be a sales trainer, meaning it was in my mind already. And I said, I don't have a college education, so I can't walk in through the front door. So I went through the back door in Portland, Maine, and applied for a street, an outside sales rep, street sales B2B position. And I believe that if I could show my value and worth and show results, that I would get somebody's attention. And it was a 5-year plan, meaning I was willing to invest 5 years to get to corporate. And it took less than 1 year. And it was visualization and just believing and seeing it in your head. I almost didn't get the job, though. On the cubicle across from me sat a tenured President's Club winning rep named Rick Lobley, whom I adore. He left the company a couple of years back, but I used to throw paper clips over, and I used to take a rubber band and attach his headset to the phone, and I was terrible. But he is a lovely guy. He's still alive, of course. And so he stood up, big tall guy, 6'2", and he looked over down at me and he said, "Hey, Will, I'm doing a ride along tomorrow with some guy that Jerry, who was the head of sales training, is going to hire." And now, like 2 months before that, because I'd made some noise at some training and probably brought attention to myself, he called me up. He said, I'd like to brainstorm with you. So he wanted to talk about expanding the department. The company was growing like crazy, and et cetera, et cetera. So we had a really great conversation, but it never got around to, is there an opening? Are you going to hire somebody? What's the salary, et cetera? So I said, you're doing a ride along with somebody from the outside? So I called Jerry up immediately. And I said, Jerry, Rick Lobley tells me he's doing a ride along tomorrow with somebody you've hired to be, or you're going to hire to be your next trainer. Because he was a one-man band at the time. Well, 2 technically. And he said, yeah. I said, well, when was I removed from consideration? He said, well, you're a sales guy and commission bonus. I got the impression you weren't really interested in a straight salary job. But I didn't say that. No, you didn't say it. That's what and I said, we never even talked money. He said, yeah, you're right. I said, man, I want this job, Jerry, big time. He said, really? I said, yeah. He said, well, so-and-so is coming in at 10 o'clock tomorrow to do a presentation. Why don't you come at 8 and do a presentation, 15-minute presentation on cold calling? And thank goodness for Rick Lobley telling me, because otherwise I don't know where I'd be. I went in, did the presentation, and got the job. But I owe it to Rick Lobley.
Wow. Well, shout out to people that do that, because that's, it's like timing, right? Timing and somebody else is looking out for you. That's awesome.
Yes, sir. Yes,
I think
sir.
about a lot of the reps that have told me that too, and that they've kind of been in my corner for certain things, and I try to pay that back as much as possible and let people know that as well. But that's amazing. So we literally would have been left without the legendary Will McDonald in sales training had he not spoken up, and that's monumental.
Yeah, it's just Rick Lobley telling me I'm doing a ride along with somebody they're going to hire. It's like, oh my goodness, yeah. we have to check into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me this, because you've had a lot of experience with sales training, with creating a sales training platform, and then coming on and kind of inheriting a sales training platform. Are there specific sales techniques that you feel are no longer effective? from when you first learned them?
Well, yeah, the Dale Carnegie hook, anything that feels like manipulation, long-winded, self-serving salespeople that just yak, yak, yak about nothing, well, about themselves and their company. I can't believe in 2021, no, 2020, it's almost 2021. Little senior moment there, sorry.
That's all right.
I get emails that are like 1,000 words, 600 words. Let me tell you about us and who we help and what we do. And it's just bizarre. And then when I have personal interactions with salespeople over the phone, trying to sell a book, sales training, sales technology, and they just go on and on and on about themselves, and they never ask a question. They never ask me even how I'm doing or what challenges we might be experiencing. It's really awful. And a lot of these companies sell sales training process packages. It's like, man, I wouldn't buy your sales process if my life depended on it. So making it about yourself, making it about your company. They used to call features and benefits selling, or features, advantages, benefits selling. They called them the FABs. That's over. Fab selling is gone. It's not about features and benefits or features, advantages, and benefits selling anymore. It cannot be about the bells and whistles. Back in the heyday, bells and whistles were very important. Now, customers don't care. They want results. They want to see an improvement in their bottom line. And they want you to know they don't give a rat's behind about you or your company. It's how can you benefit me? How can you bring value to me? How can you improve my situation?
Yeah, I know that's true because I remember when I first started. It's funny, my sales manager and I, we talk about this all the time. So shout out to Chris Baker in Salt Lake. But we talk about how when we start to get some success, we start to get deals, we start to get sales made, we tend to, and I'm totally guilty of it myself, we tend to try to cut and make a shortcut to get to that feeling once again, because it's almost like a drug, right? Not that I've ever done drugs or endorsed drugs or whatever, but it's almost like a rush when you get that deal inked and you know you've done everything you possibly can. You go out there, you make 5 more calls or 10 more calls, you're on a roll, and then you skip a very vital part of that. And usually it has something to do with what you're saying, as far as we start talking about ourselves. We start talking about all of our deals that we signed up. We start talking about the company and the features and benefits, and then we don't talk about the actual pain that the customer might be experiencing with the incumbent. And we also don't talk about the real value that we're going to bring them, right? And again, I'm not saying that that's what other reps do. I'm just saying that I'm guilty of it. I've done it more times than I'd like to admit. So on that flip side, though, the opposite side of the coin, Will, is what are some sales tactics that you learned back then that are still just as effective today?
Maybe the most important question you've asked so far. What a great question. First, you've got to decide what kind of salesperson you're going to be, male or female. What are your values and what do you stand for, and what will you not circumvent or take a shortcut on in order to win a deal, like lie, exaggerate, embellish. And God bless Universe never asked me to ever suggest we should even slightly exaggerate. Tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I learned a long time ago, and it may help somebody kind of step aside from the pressure, especially if you've never sold before, and Universe hires some people right out of college that have never sold before, is, this pressure from the sales manager, this pressure for not having a 0 week.
Mm-hmm.
There's just this quota pressure. I mean, there's pressure if you accept the pressure. And so I know if you ask a room full of salespeople, and I've done it 100 times, if not more than 100 times, what's your job? To sell, to close deals, to make quota, to go to President's Club, and the list goes on and on and on. And so what if I let you out of that? What if I gave you an escape from that so you don't have to feel all clenched every day? I better close one, which you call that commission stink. And your prospects will smell that commission stink on you, and they'll sense your desperation, and they will want to have nothing to do with you. So the release from that pressure that worked 20 years ago, 40 years ago, and works in 2020, I got the year right this time, is here are your two jobs as a professional salesperson. Number one, wake up every morning wanting to help somebody. That's all. We have a mantra in sales training. The moment you stop trying to sell people and start helping them, they will buy your help. So, hey, what could be better than that? Wake up saying, I'm going to go find some people to help. Yeah. And number two, don't fixate on the close. That is commission stink. And your prospects will pinch their nose and get away from you as quick as they can. So all you need to work very hard, and it isn't easy, is to make a commitment to the best of your ability. And you have good days, bad days. To the best of your ability, bring every sales conversation, that opportunity, the process, bring it to a close. Gratefully accept your yes, just as gratefully accept your no, and then say to yourself, next. And don't worry about closing the deal. Try to bring the thing to a conclusion, because 60% of all sales opportunities result in no decision at all. They ghost you. They ignore your voicemail messages. They ignore your emails. And so that's where you lose it. So try to bring every conversation to a conclusion and wake up with a bright smile on your face, grateful that you get to go out and help people.
Yeah, that's probably the golden nugget that I'll take away from this conversation is bring every conversation to a close, because I feel like we leave things too open-ended, right? And it's funny because I hear the analogy of sales being compared to dating all the time. But if it was dating, you'd already have the second date already set up, right? You have the third date already set up. You'd have I'm going to take you to the super fancy restaurant because you made the cut, and you'd have everything planned out. You'd always have a next time to see that person. So with sales, which literally is going to feed you and your family, why wouldn't you have something mapped out? It's interesting you mentioned that too, because I just had a conversation with a prospect this past week. We're sitting down, relative large account. It's going to be mostly paper towels, soap, sanitizer, mats, and that sort of thing. But I asked him, I said, so if I come back next week, we sit down, I show you samples, I show you the cost analysis, I show you this, what's to stop us from inking the deal that day? And I use that exact verbiage. And he goes, well, I mean, that's kind of moving a little bit fast. I mean, why do you want to just jump right into it? I said, well, here's the thing, right? I feel like I can earn your business by next week, okay? If you don't feel like that's the case, when do you think that I could earn your business? I mean, what's your timeline when you're looking to make a decision? He's like, well, why do you keep asking me that? I said, okay, look, I'm going to take off my sales hat. I'm going to tell you, if we leave this open-ended, I'm going to keep calling you until I have an appointment. And at that point, I'm going to be a pest. You're not going to do business with me anyway. And he started laughing. He goes, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, I guess when you come in next week, we'll make a decision. Makes sense. I was like, okay, cool. So to your other point, sincerity, right? Just be yourself, be honest. So yeah.
As an actor, and I believe that acting, selling, leading is all the same. And it's not about deception. It's not about fiction, but it is about storytelling. A great CEO has a vision. That's a story. A great salesperson has the story of your issues, your problems and struggles, and then the universe story that hopefully we can merge together so everybody lives happily ever after. And of course, the actor's number one priority, move the story. It's not about you, not about your character. It's about you and your castmates moving the story forward. So that's a really big deal, a very big deal.
Yeah. And I think from a sales rep perspective too, not just dealing with your consumer or your customer that way, but also dealing with your sales manager and your GM or your branch manager that way too is super important, because how many times as a sales trainer have you heard the story from a sales manager and go, I feel like every single week when we have our sales meeting, my guys talk about the same accounts over and over and over again. And it's always the same thing. Oh, I'm going to call them this week. Oh, I'm going to call them this week. Oh, no, I'm going to call them this week. Like, there's got to be some kind of resolution, right? And again, how you mentioned just a few moments ago, you said that what was the stat again? It was how many sales end up with no resolution?
60% end in no decision. There's no
Right.
yes, there's no no. There's just this awkward black hole, and you can't even get a return of your phone call. It's the dreadful part of sales, and that's why we need to commit to driving the sale to a conclusion. Yes or no, both are fine. You're certainly going to collect plenty of yeses and buku no's. You
Right.
know, I think I once calculated that in our industry, for a successful salesperson, every no is worth $10. Literally, every no is worth $10, $10, $10, and then you get the yes that justifies all the $10 no's.
Yeah. I had a sales manager tell me one time, he said, keep track of how many doors you actually hit that month, and then go back like after a full year, after you see what your commission is, what your total pay is, and then calculate how much was each of those cold calls actually worth in terms of dollars and cents. And I was like, that's so brilliant, because if you knew it that way, you'd hit every single door on the block, because you'd be like, I'm going to go hit 100 doors here and there, because I know if I put in this much activity based on my sales average and based on my closing average, that door's worth like maybe $2, right?
Yes.
Which in the long run is gigantic.
Huge.
Absolutely. Will, let me ask you this question. As far as, because I asked Julia this, and I was wondering what your take on this would be. I'm sure as a sales trainer, you've heard your share of excuses as to why salespeople aren't doing well, or why they can't do certain things that you guys are telling them to do or training them to do. What's been the biggest excuse, the number one excuse that the salespeople make for why they're not doing well?
Well, it's a small collection of things. It's you don't understand my market. Those things don't play in New Jersey or Philadelphia or Sacramento.
That's what Julia said.
Oh, give me a break, man. You know, there's an old expression, that's a person who blooms wherever they're planted. So I don't care where you are in the country, what the weather's like, what your territory's like. None of that matters. All that matters is what's in here, and what's right here. If you have the heart and you have the conscientious and conscious presence of mind, and know how to be mindful and present, you bloom where you're planted. So people that point fingers at the weather, or Sally's got a way better territory than me, I got such a sucky territory. I don't have time for those people, because in sales, and it's one of the things that makes sales so special, is we own it. We own our paychecks. We own our commissions. We own it. Whether it rains or shines, we're the weatherman. We're the weather woman. We own it. And so there is no pointing anywhere but right here.
Right.
And you said I did watch the Julia interview. It was excellent. But I don't recall that question. She said the same thing.
Yeah, the same thing. In fact, she said, I'm probably going to misquote her, but she said, sales reps say, well, it's different in insert location, right? which from my standpoint, okay, sure, things are different, right? The weather's different, the people are different, whatever. But here's the thing: like I came from Sacramento, California, which is very liberal leaning, left wing leaning. And no, I'm not going to jump into politics. People don't comment.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're not going to do it. But it's very left leaning, very liberal leaning, very fast paced. Like they want to do things right away. To coming up to East Idaho. Oh, by the way, in Sacramento, we had like 6 other competitors out there. Jump up to East Idaho, I have 2 other competitors, and that's it. And everybody's very conservative, right? You walk into a Walmart, you see a guy with a gun on his hip, just just out there in the open, right? So it's a very different place. But from my experience, a cold call is a cold call here. It's the same thing as a cold call in Sacramento, except in the wintertime in Sacramento, it's about 67 degrees, maybe 70. Out here, it's snowing and it's 8 degrees. So, but that's the only difference with that. So my personal experience, no, it's not any different. The sales process isn't going to be different. The way you talk to people is not going to be any different because people ultimately will buy you. So
Absolutely. And you brought up a really great point is for those of you who are just beginning in sales, let me assure you of one thing. The best time to be in the street, literally knocking on doors, is in poor weather days. Pouring rain, blizzard snow, no visibility, because the gatekeeper will like take so much pity on you, maybe offer you a cup of coffee or a cup of cocoa, and the decision makers will respect you that you're out there hustling in the snow, the rain, the sleet. And also, no competitors will be knocking on that company's door that day.
Nope.
Believe you me, they won't be. I love cold calling in poor weather.
Yeah, there was a stat that I always talk about this too. If you go on to Google and you type in sales stats, it'll pull up with a blue background and white numbers, and it says that 50% of salespeople don't go back after the first visit. And so how I interpreted that was, well, awesome. I'll cut out half my competition by just dropping back a second time. But to your point about the crazy weather, to me it was a blast to walk out in the snow or when it was raining, because not because I was like super hyper focused on my competition, what they weren't doing, but I was just like it's fun to go. It's fun to make videos of my hair frozen in the wintertime here and post them on LinkedIn, have people look at that. I mean, that's a blast to do. But to your point about the gatekeepers or receptionists, that's true, because there was an account that when I first came up to Idaho, was the middle of July, and this gatekeeper receptionist, super just no salespeople, gigantic sign on the front door, salespeople by appointment only or whatever. And I come in and she's very, I won't do her voice. I was tempted to do the Monsters Inc. voice, the HR lady in there, but I won't do that. But she basically told me to go pound salt and was like, we don't take salespeople here, go away, right? That winter, it's snowing. I'm wearing a pea coat because I was stupid and I didn't know that snow will go through a pea coat and actually freeze it. so I'm wearing the pea coat, my hair's frozen. I walk into the same place thinking she's going to kick me out. And no, the response was, you're walking around in this? Oh, sweetheart, come on in, sit down. Who do you want to talk to? I was like, this is awesome. Why can't it snow every day? This is fantastic. So yeah, that's absolutely true. But you mentioned new salespeople. So Will, if you had to give one piece of advice to a brand new salesperson, like if they learn nothing else from this podcast, nothing else about our conversation, what would you have them take away in order to make them a good salesperson? I know it's a tough question. I apologize.
It is, but I have an answer and it's forming in my head. I guess the biggest piece of advice is mean it. You can't sell if you don't mean it. And you will be tested, sorely tested, and emotionally or psycho-emotionally, you will have bruised knuckles and cuts and little injuries psycho-emotionally, you've got to mean it. And it goes right to goal setting. So many people, goal setting is the double-edged sword. It can either make you create an incredible life and lifestyle for your family, or it can leave you feeling like the biggest loser that ever lived. And oftentimes the difference is I mean it. Every time I get tested, my answer to the test, I mean it. And you just have to so mean it. And you can't fake meaning it, and you can't manufacture meaning it. So you've got to ask yourself and do a little soul searching. Do you mean it? Really? Let me throw this in front of you. Do you still mean it? Let me give you this obstacle. Do you still mean it? So in order to be a successful salesperson, you got to mean it.
I love that. I'm gonna put that on a slide. I'm gonna print it off and I'm gonna put it in front of my desk. I mean it today. Today I mean it, right? By the way, I'm gonna put this out there. I've been talking to Joey Hall and Bill Wise and Allison Abbott, all these President's Club Achieving reps. I mean it when I say I want to go to President's Club this year. There's no more, hopefully I'll go. I hope this happens. I mean it. So I'm taking your advice, Will. I mean it every single day. We're going to go out there and get it.
Let me give you a quick tweak.
Yeah, go for
when
it.
You do your bumper sticker or your poster, whatever that you're going to hang up is, I mean it always, exclamation point. Not I mean it today, maybe. I mean it always.
That's awesome. Real quick, before we end and Will says goodbye, I want to just give a quick shout out to LinkedIn. Keep in mind, everybody, LinkedIn is not a sponsor of mine. So I don't get paid a single dime from LinkedIn, but LinkedIn, if you're listening and you want to throw it my way, for free. But without LinkedIn, guys, I would not have the ability to show this podcast. It would just be on YouTube. Luckily, they let me share it on LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn has given me the ability to get in touch with people within my own company, within my own sphere, that have really accomplished the goals that I want to accomplish as well. And without that platform, guys, I would not be able to have those amazing conversations. So LinkedIn, thank you for that. Will, we're going to sign off, but is there something you want to say to our listeners?
I guess it's something that I've shared with people for decades and decades. Find a way to legitimately have fun. So let's cut it back to 2 words. Have fun. Nothing is worth it. Not any vocation, not any career path, not anything, whether it's sales or teaching or paving roads for a living. Have fun. Life is so short. Have fun. Find a way to have fun or do something else.
Absolutely. And can we get that famous Will McDonald slogan at the end?
It would be my pleasure. May the sales force be with you.
Excellent. Everybody, thank you so much for listening to Stop Interview and Start Selling. I'm your host, Phil Myers.